The spring rain pattered against the windows of the small accounting firm where Mike sat, staring at his computer screen in disbelief. His hands trembled as he scrolled through years of bank statements and child support payment records. After 15 years of faithfully paying child support for his daughter, he had discovered something that made his stomach turn: he had overpaid by more than $13,000. The revelation came during a routine financial review he decided to do while preparing for his daughter's college expenses. Mike had always been the kind of father who went above and beyond, working overtime at his construction job to ensure his daughter never went without. Even when times were tough, he never missed a payment, sometimes picking up extra weekend shifts just to make sure the money was there on time. "This can't be right," he muttered, double-checking his calculations for the 5th time. The numbers didn't lie. Due to a clerical error in the court system and automatic payment withdrawals that hadn't been adjusted after his daughter turned 18, the overpayments had accumulated over the past year and a half without anyone noticing. Mike's mind wandered back to the day his marriage ended. He and his ex-wife had promised to keep things civil for their daughter's sake. In the early years, they managed to co-parent successfully, despite the occasional disagreement. His ex-wife had moved to a neighboring town, remarried, and started a new family, but Mike remained a constant in his daughter's life, never missing a birthday, school event, or holiday. With shaking hands, he picked up his phone and called his daughter, now a freshman in college. Their relationship had grown stronger over the years, built on trust, understanding, and his unwavering support. "Hey sweetie," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "How are your classes going?" They chatted about her upcoming exams and her plans for the summer break. Mike's heart swelled with pride as she talked about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. He didn't mention the overpayments, not yet. First, he needed to have a conversation with her mother. The next day, Mike drafted an email to his ex-wife, carefully detailing his findings and attaching copies of all the relevant documents. He kept the tone professional and courteous, expecting that she would be as shocked as he was and willing to work out a solution. After all, they had managed to maintain a respectful relationship for their daughter's sake all these years. His ex-wife's response came 3 days later, and it wasn't what he had hoped for. "I've received your email regarding the alleged overpayments," she wrote. "However, I've already spent this money on our daughter's expenses. I don't believe I should have to return anything." Mike read the email several times, each time feeling a new wave of frustration wash over him. The money wasn't just pocket change, it was equivalent to half a year's worth of his daughter's college tuition. He had been planning to use any recovered funds to help with her education expenses, making her dream of becoming a veterinarian a little more attainable. That evening, sitting in his modest apartment, Mike looked at old photos of his daughter growing up. There she was at her 5th grade graduation, beaming with pride as she held up her certificate. Another showed her first soccer game, her jersey too big but her smile enormous. He had never regretted a single penny spent on her happiness, but this situation felt different. This wasn't about the regular support he had always gladly provided, this was about fairness and doing what was right. After a sleepless night, Mike decided to seek legal advice. He wasn't a confrontational person by nature, and the thought of potential legal proceedings made him uncomfortable. However, the principle of the matter and the significant amount involved left him feeling he had no choice. He needed to handle this situation carefully, not just for himself, but to set an example for his daughter about standing up for what's right while maintaining dignity and respect. The local legal aid office connected him with a family law attorney who specialized in child support cases. As Mike sat in the attorney's office, surrounded by law books and certificates, he couldn't help but wonder how things had gotten to this point. He had always prided himself on handling his responsibilities without complaint, but now he faced the prospect of taking legal action against the mother of his child. "Based on the documentation you've provided," the attorney said, reviewing the stack of papers Mike had brought, "you have a strong case for recovering these overpayments. However, you should be prepared, these cases can become complicated, especially when they involve long-term co-parenting relationships. Mike nodded, his mind already racing ahead to how this might affect his relationship with his daughter. Would she understand why he needed to take this step? Would this create tension in their relationship just when she needed both parents' support the most? These questions weighed heavily on his mind as he left the attorney's office, the first steps of a legal process he never wanted to take beginning to unfold before him. The weeks following Mike's legal consultation were filled with a mix of anxiety and determination. He had hoped his ex-wife would reconsider her position, but her subsequent messages became increasingly defensive and hostile. The woman who had once worked alongside him to create a stable environment for their daughter now seemed like a stranger. One Sunday afternoon, while organizing his documents for the upcoming legal proceedings, Mike received an unexpected call from his daughter. "Dad, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Mom's been saying some things, about money and lawyers." Mike's heart sank. This was exactly what he had been trying to avoid, his daughter getting caught in the middle of this dispute. He moved to his worn leather recliner, the one where he used to read her bedtime stories during her weekend visits, and took a deep breath. "Sweetheart," he began carefully, "there's been a mix-up with some payments, and I'm trying to sort it out. It's nothing for you to worry about." But even as he spoke the words, he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. His daughter, now a young adult, deserved more than a sugar-coated version of the truth. "Dad, I'm not a kid anymore," she replied, her voice steady. "Tell me what's really going on." Over the next hour, Mike explained the situation, careful to stick to the facts without painting either parent in a negative light. He detailed the overpayments, his attempts to resolve the situation amicably, and his reluctant decision to seek legal help. His daughter listened quietly, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "That's a lot of money, Dad," she finally said. "That could help with my tuition next semester." There was a pause before she added, "I'll talk to Mom." Mike quickly interjected, "No, honey, this isn't your burden to bear. Your focus should be on your studies and your future. Let me handle this." But his daughter had inherited his determination. The next day, she visited her mother, hoping to mediate the situation. The conversation didn't go as planned. Her mother insisted that all the money had been spent on legitimate expenses for her upbringing, despite the payments continuing well past her 18th birthday. The failed mediation attempt led to an uncomfortable family dinner where Mike's ex-wife suggested a meeting to talk things through. Mike agreed, hoping for a breakthrough. They met at a local coffee shop, neutral territory that held no memories of their shared past. His ex-wife arrived with a folder of her own, filled with receipts for their daughter's expenses over the years, dance classes, summer camps, school supplies, medical bills. "Look at all this," she said, spreading the papers across the table. "Every penny went to our daughter's benefit. Why are you trying to punish me for being a good mother?" Mike felt his frustration rising but kept his voice level. "This isn't about punishing anyone," he explained. "It's about correcting a mistake. Those extra payments weren't meant to continue after her 18th birthday. That money could help with her college expenses now." "College expenses?" his ex-wife scoffed. "Weren't you the one who always said you'd figure out a way to help her through school? Or was that just talk?" The comment stung. Mike had indeed promised to help with college, and he was keeping that promise, working overtime, cutting back on his own expenses, even considering a second job. But that didn't make the overpayments right. Later that evening, Mike received a text from his daughter, "Mom told me about the meeting. Are you okay?" He stared at the message, touched by her concern but worried about the strain this situation was putting on her relationships with both parents. The legal process moved forward slowly. Mike's attorney filed the necessary paperwork, and a court date was set for 3 months out. The documentation of the overpayments was clear, but his ex-wife's lawyer argued that the funds had been used in good faith for their daughter's benefit, complicating what should have been a straightforward case. During this time, Mike noticed subtle changes in his daughter's behavior. Their weekly phone calls became shorter, and she seemed more guarded in their conversations. When he asked about her mother, she would quickly change the subject. It was clear she felt torn between her parents, despite Mike's best efforts to shield her from the conflict. One evening, while reviewing his case files, Mike found an old birthday card from his daughter. Inside, in her childhood handwriting, she had written, "You're the best dad ever because you always do the right thing." The words hit him hard. Was pursuing this legal battle really the right thing? The money was significant, but was it worth the emotional toll it was taking on their family? His attorney had warned him that family court cases could get messy, but Mike hadn't fully appreciated what that meant until now. Every email, every text message, every financial transaction from the past several years was being scrutinized. His ex-wife's lawyer had begun painting him as a vindictive ex-husband rather than a father seeking to correct a legitimate error. As the court date approached, Mike received an unexpected visitor at his workplace, his ex-wife's new husband. The man looked uncomfortable as he asked to speak privately. Over coffee in the break room, he revealed that the situation was causing significant stress in their household, affecting their own children who had grown up alongside Mike's daughter. "Look," the man said, "I know you're within your rights to pursue this, but is there any way we can work something out? For everyone's sake." The conversation with his ex-wife's new husband lingered in Mike's mind for days. During their break room discussion, the man had proposed a compromise, a payment plan that would return the overpaid child support in monthly installments over 2 years. It wasn't ideal, but it offered a path forward that might preserve the fragile peace between all parties involved. Mike sat in his truck after work, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. His daughter's latest text message glowed on his phone screen, "Can we have dinner this weekend? Just us?" The message filled him with both hope and apprehension. Their recent conversations had been strained, weighed down by the unspoken tension of the ongoing legal situation. Before responding to his daughter, Mike called his attorney to discuss the payment plan proposal. "It's not uncommon for these cases to end in settlement," the lawyer explained. "But make sure any agreement is properly documented and legally binding. Good intentions don't always last." That weekend, Mike and his daughter met at their favorite diner, the same place where they'd shared countless meals during her childhood. She looked tired, the stress of being caught between her parents evident in the dark circles under her eyes. As they settled into their usual booth, the familiar aroma of coffee and grilled onions brought back memories of simpler times. "Dad," she began, stirring her coffee absently, "I've been doing some research about similar cases." She pulled out her tablet, showing him various legal articles and forum discussions about child support overpayment cases. "I know you're trying to handle this without involving me, but I'm not a little kid anymore. This affects me too." Mike listened as his daughter shared her perspective. She'd calculated that if the overpaid money was returned, it would cover nearly 2 semesters of her veterinary school prerequisites. But more than that, she worried about the long-term impact this conflict would have on their family dynamics. "Your stepfather came to see me," Mike revealed, watching her reaction carefully. "He suggested a payment plan." His daughter's eyes lit up with hope. "Really? Mom didn't mention that. What do you think about it?" Before Mike could respond, his phone buzzed with an email from his ex-wife's lawyer. The message was brief but significant. They were willing to discuss settlement terms, but with conditions. They wanted Mike to cover all legal fees incurred so far, and they insisted that any agreement include a non-disclosure clause. The following week, both parties met at the lawyer's office. Mike's ex-wife looked different somehow, smaller, more vulnerable than she had appeared at the coffee shop. Her usual confident demeanor was replaced by something that looked almost like guilt. "Before we start," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to explain something." She revealed that financial troubles in her current marriage had led her to rely on the continued child support payments, even though she knew they should have stopped. The money had helped keep their blended family afloat during a difficult period when her new husband's business was struggling. The revelation changed the atmosphere in the room. Mike remembered his own financial struggles, the nights he'd stayed awake wondering how to make ends meet while keeping up with his obligations. The situation wasn't as black and white as it had seemed at first. Working with their lawyers, they spent the next 3 hours crafting an agreement. The final terms included a structured repayment plan spread over 18 months, with payments scheduled to align with their daughter's college semester schedule. Both parties would share the legal fees, and most importantly, they agreed to attend family counseling sessions to repair the damaged relationships. As they left the lawyer's office, Mike's ex-wife touched his arm lightly. "I'm sorry it came to this," she said. "I should have been honest from the beginning." The simple acknowledgement meant more than she probably realized. That evening, Mike called his daughter to share the news. Her relief was palpable through the phone. "Dad, I'm proud of you," she said. "I know this wasn't easy, but you handled it with grace." Her words reminded him of all the times he'd told her how proud he was of her achievements. Now here she was, proud of him. The first repayment arrived exactly as scheduled, deposited directly into an account set up specifically for their daughter's education expenses. Mike forwarded the bank notification to his daughter, who responded with a string of heart emojis and a photo of her latest veterinary school application materials. The family counseling sessions, though initially awkward, began to heal old wounds that went far deeper than the recent financial dispute. During one particularly emotional session, Mike's ex-wife admitted that her resistance to returning the money had been partly driven by lingering resentment from their divorce, feelings she hadn't even realized she was harboring. Mike's daughter flourished once the tension began to ease. Her grades improved, and she became more engaged in her pre-veterinary studies. She even started joining her younger half-siblings for weekend study sessions, helping them with their homework while working on her own assignments. The situation had another unexpected outcome. Mike's relationship with his ex-wife's new husband strengthened. The man's initiative in seeking a compromise had been a turning point, and they found themselves developing a genuine respect for each other. They occasionally met for coffee, sharing stories about their experiences as fathers and discussing ways to support their blended family. As the monthly repayments continued, Mike noticed a shift in his own perspective. What had started as a fight for justice had evolved into something more meaningful, a lesson in forgiveness, understanding, and the importance of family bonds over financial matters. The money was being repaid, yes, but the real wealth was in the relationships that were being rebuilt and strengthened. 6 months into the repayment plan, life had settled into a new rhythm. Mike checked his phone one morning to find a message from his daughter featuring a photo of her acceptance letter to the veterinary program. The first thing he noticed wasn't just her excitement, but that both he and his ex-wife were tagged in the same message, something that wouldn't have seemed possible just months ago. The monthly repayments had been arriving consistently, each one representing another small step toward resolution. Mike had set up an automated system that immediately transferred the funds into his daughter's education account, turning what had once been a source of conflict into a tool for her future. But money wasn't the only thing being rebuilt. During a family counseling session that week, their therapist noted how far they'd come. "When you first started coming here, you could barely look at each other," she observed. "Now you're planning your daughter's graduation celebration together." It was true, Mike and his ex-wife had somehow found their way back to being collaborative parents, even if the path had been unexpectedly rocky. The celebration planning meeting took place at a local restaurant, with Mike, his ex-wife, her husband, and their daughter all present. As they discussed venues and guest lists, Mike couldn't help but remember the tense coffee shop confrontation that had taken place in this same restaurant less than a year ago. The contrast was striking. "We should invite your aunt from Colorado," his ex-wife suggested, looking at Mike. "She always believed in our daughter's dream of becoming a vet." The casual mention of his family member, someone his ex-wife hadn't spoken about in years, caught Mike off guard. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about how far they'd come. Their daughter beamed at her parents' cooperation, but Mike noticed something else in her expression, a hint of anxiety. Later, when they were alone, she confided in him. "Dad, I need to tell you something," she began hesitantly. "I've been offered an internship at a veterinary clinic in another state. It's an amazing opportunity, but..." Mike understood her concern immediately. The distance would complicate their newly healed family dynamic, and there was also the matter of the ongoing repayment plan. "When opportunity knocks, you answer," he told her, repeating the phrase he'd used throughout her childhood. "We'll figure out the details." That evening, Mike made 2 important calls. The first was to his ex-wife, informing her about their daughter's internship opportunity. To his surprise, she was immediately supportive. "We can't hold her back because of our past mistakes," she said. The second call was to his attorney, discussing how to adjust the repayment plan to account for additional education expenses that would come with the internship. As news of their daughter's internship spread through their extended family, something unexpected happened. Relatives who had taken sides during the original dispute began reaching out, wanting to contribute to her future. Mike's sister offered her airline miles to help with travel costs. His ex-wife's parents proposed setting up a small emergency fund for their granddaughter's move. The family's healing process had created ripples beyond their immediate circle. At a neighborhood barbecue, Mike overheard someone describing their story to another parent dealing with a similar situation. They turned a legal battle into a lesson about family, the neighbor said, unaware that Mike was within earshot. Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the most important growth. However, not everything was perfect. The financial strain of the repayment plan began to show in subtle ways at his ex-wife's household. Mike noticed their younger children wearing fewer new clothes and their usual summer camping trip being postponed. During one counseling session, his ex-wife broke down, admitting the guilt she felt over creating this situation. Without telling anyone, Mike approached his attorney about modifying the repayment schedule to ease the burden on his ex-wife's family. "I don't want the children to suffer," he explained. "Maybe we can extend the timeline a bit." His attorney seemed surprised but helped draft a modification that would provide some breathing room while still ensuring full repayment. When Mike presented the modified plan to his ex-wife, she was initially resistant, seeing it as charity. "You don't owe us any kindness," she said firmly. But Mike explained that it wasn't about kindness, it was about family. "Those kids are my daughter's siblings," he reminded her. "Their well-being matters to her, which means it matters to me." The modification was accepted, and the relief was immediately visible in the children's lives. The camping trip was rescheduled, and Mike even offered to help with some of the preparations, teaching his daughter's half-siblings some of the camping tricks he'd shown her years ago. As summer turned to fall, Mike received an unexpected package at work. Inside was a framed photo of their entire blended family at a recent gathering, along with a handwritten note from his daughter, "Thank you for showing me that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. You've taught me more about integrity and forgiveness through this experience than any classroom ever could." Looking at the photo, Mike realized that their story had evolved far beyond a dispute over overpaid child support. It had become a testament to the power of choosing understanding over anger, cooperation over conflict, and family over pride. The money was still being repaid, but the true debt, the one owed to their family's future, was being repaid in ways that no court could have mandated. The day of the move to her internship location arrived sooner than anyone expected. Mike stood in the driveway of his ex-wife's house, helping load the last few boxes into his daughter's used car. The morning air was crisp, and the scene felt surreal, both families working together to send their aspiring veterinarian off to her next adventure. His ex-wife emerged from the house carrying a care package she'd assembled. "I put some of your favorite snacks in here," she told their daughter, her voice wavering slightly. "And there's an envelope with some extra money from the latest repayment." Dad and I agreed you might need it for setting up your new place. The mention of the repayment no longer carried the weight of controversy it once had. Instead, it had become a symbol of their collective commitment to their daughter's future. Mike watched as his ex-wife's husband helped secure a wobbly box filled with veterinary textbooks, remembered how this man's intervention had helped set them on a better path. Before their daughter left, the entire blended family gathered for a photo. Mike's ex-wife's youngest child, barely 7, insisted on holding a sign she'd made, "Future Animal Doctor." The moment captured everything their family had become, imperfect but united, stronger for having faced their challenges together. As their daughter's car disappeared down the street, Mike noticed his ex-wife wiping away tears. Without thinking, he offered her a tissue from his pocket. "Remember when we dropped her off for her first day of kindergarten?" he asked. They shared a laugh, remembering how their tiny daughter had marched into the classroom without a backward glance, already independent. The following weeks brought adjustments for everyone. The repayment schedule continued steadily, but now included a new component, a small additional amount both parents had agreed to contribute toward their daughter's emergency fund. This decision had come after a late-night phone call about a minor car repair she needed in her new city. During one of their now regular family counseling sessions, their therapist observed how their language had changed. "You've stopped saying, 'my daughter' and 'your daughter,'" she noted. "Now you both say, 'our daughter.' That's significant progress." It was true, somewhere along the way, they'd rediscovered what it meant to be a family, even if it looked different than they'd originally planned. Mike's ex-wife's husband had become an unexpected ally in maintaining their new family dynamic. He organized monthly video calls where all the siblings could connect, ensuring their daughter stayed involved in her half-siblings' lives despite the distance. During one of these calls, their daughter shared exciting news about her first major procedure at the veterinary clinic. "I assisted in surgery today," she announced proudly, her face glowing on the screen. "And guess what? I used the stethoscope you all pitched in to buy me." It was a gift they'd arranged together, each family member contributing what they could. Even her youngest half-sister had contributed $2 from her piggy bank. The repayment plan had reached its halfway point, and Mike's ex-wife suggested they meet to discuss something important. Over coffee at their usual spot, she revealed that her family's financial situation had improved significantly. Her husband's business had recovered, and she'd received a promotion at work. "We want to accelerate the repayments," she explained. "It's the right thing to do." Mike was touched by the gesture but concerned about their stability. "Are you sure?" he asked. "The current arrangement is working fine." His ex-wife smiled, pulling out a carefully prepared budget showing they could handle increased payments without straining their household. That evening, Mike called their daughter to share the news. "Mom wants to increase the repayments," he told her. There was a pause on the line before she responded, "You know what amazes me, Dad? A year ago, this conversation would have been about conflict. Now it's about Mom trying to do more than expected." The accelerated repayment schedule freed up additional funds just as their daughter encountered her first major career challenge. A specialized training opportunity had opened up at her clinic, but it required an investment in equipment and certification fees. Thanks to the adjusted repayment plan, they were able to help her seize this opportunity. During a weekend visit home, their daughter brought her first official patient files to show her families. As they gathered around her, watching her explain complex medical terms with confidence, Mike caught his ex-wife's eye. They shared a knowing look. This was what they'd been paying for all along, not just with money, but with their efforts to heal their family. The monthly repayments had become more than just financial transactions. Each one represented another building block in their daughter's future and another step in their family's journey toward genuine reconciliation. The ledger that had once shown only debts and credits now reflected something far more valuable, the dividends of forgiveness and cooperation. One Sunday afternoon, Mike received an unexpected call from his ex-wife's husband. "We've been thinking," he said, "about starting a college fund for the younger kids. We'd appreciate your advice, given how well you've managed everything with our daughter." The request symbolized how far they'd come, from adversaries to advisors, from broken to blended. The story of their $13,000 dispute had begun circulating in their community, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of a cautionary tale about bitter exes and legal battles, it had become an example of how families could choose a better path. Local family court mediators had even asked if they would be willing to share their experience with other families facing similar challenges. Winter had settled in when Mike received an invitation that would take their family's story in an unexpected direction. The local family court mediator who had heard about their case asked if they would consider speaking at a workshop for divorced parents struggling with financial disputes. The request made Mike pause. Sharing their story meant being vulnerable in front of strangers. He decided to discuss it with his ex-wife first, wanting to ensure they were on the same page. They met at their daughter's favorite diner, where the waitress still remembered their family's regular orders from years ago. "It might help other families avoid the mistakes we made," his ex-wife mused, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "But are we ready to be that honest about everything?" Their daughter, when consulted via video call, surprised them both with her enthusiasm. "Your story isn't just about money anymore," she said, her face serious on the screen. "It's about how families can heal." She was right. Somewhere along the way, their financial dispute had transformed into something much more meaningful. The workshop was scheduled for a Saturday morning at the community center. Mike arrived early, nervous but determined. His ex-wife and her husband showed up minutes later, carrying folders containing their carefully prepared notes. They had spent weeks working together to organize their thoughts, wanting to present their experience in a way that could truly help others. As they shared their story with the room full of divorced parents, Mike noticed something powerful happening. The tension that had filled the room initially began to dissolve. When they described their lowest moments, the angry emails, the defensive responses, the pain of seeing their daughter caught in the middle, heads nodded in recognition. But it was when they talked about their journey toward resolution that the real impact became visible. One father raised his hand, voice shaking, and admitted he was in a similar situation but had been too proud to consider compromise. A mother in the back wiped away tears as she described how financial disputes were damaging her relationship with her teenagers. During the break, their daughter called unexpectedly. "How's it going?" she asked, and they put her on speakerphone so both parents could share the experience. As they described the workshop's impact, she said something that stuck with them: "You're turning our hardest chapter into a lesson for others." That's pretty amazing. The workshop led to more opportunities to help their community. The family court system asked them to participate in a pilot program for mediation cases involving child support disputes. Their story became a case study in how financial conflicts could be resolved without destroying family bonds. Meanwhile, the accelerated repayment plan was proceeding smoothly. Each payment now carried a different energy. Instead of being a reminder of past mistakes, it had become a symbol of their commitment to doing better. Mike's ex-wife had even started including personal notes with each transfer, usually updates about their daughter's younger siblings or words of encouragement about their shared mission to help other families. Their daughter's career was flourishing at the veterinary clinic. During one of their family video calls, she shared exciting news. She had been offered a permanent position after her internship, with the possibility of eventually becoming a partner in the practice. As she described her future plans, Mike noticed how both families leaned in to listen, equally invested in her success. The younger children had begun asking more questions about their unique family situation. One evening, during a joint family dinner that had become a monthly tradition, Mike's ex-wife's youngest asked innocently, "If you and Mom fought about money but became friends again, why do my friend's parents still fight?" The question led to a thoughtful discussion about growth and forgiveness, with both families contributing to the conversation. Mike's ex-wife's husband shared his perspective on stepping into a complex family situation, while Mike talked about learning to see beyond past hurts. Their daughter, listening via video call, added her insights about how the experience had shaped her understanding of family. As spring approached, marking almost a year since they had begun sharing their story with others, Mike received an unexpected email. It was from a couple who had attended their first workshop months ago. They attached a photo of their blended family at their daughter's graduation, writing, "Your story gave us hope when we needed it most. Today, we're finally at peace with each other, and our children are thriving." The email circulated through both households, eventually reaching their daughter at her clinic. She responded with a voice message that made everyone smile. "See? Sometimes the hardest things we go through become gifts for others." Her words echoed what they had all come to understand, that their journey had value beyond their own family. The remaining balance of the repayment was now significantly smaller, but its impact had grown far beyond the original $13,000. Through their willingness to share their story honestly, they had helped other families find their way toward healing. The local family court system had even begun incorporating elements of their experience into their standard mediation procedures. During one of their family counseling sessions, now attended more for maintenance than crisis management, their therapist made an observation that resonated with everyone. "You came here thinking you needed to fix a financial problem," she said, "but you ended up demonstrating the power of choosing growth over grievance." The truth of those words was evident in the photos that now filled both homes: birthday celebrations with both families present, holiday gatherings where step-siblings played together seamlessly, and proud moments from their daughter's veterinary career shared equally between households. What had started as a painful discovery of overpaid child support had evolved into a testament to the possibility of healing and growth. 2 years had passed since Mike first discovered the overpayment, and the final installment was due next week. As he sat in his living room, surrounded by photos of recent family gatherings, he reflected on how different everything had turned out from what he'd initially feared. The latest addition to his photo collection showed his daughter in her clinic, performing surgery with the confidence of a seasoned professional. The sound of incoming notifications drew his attention to his phone. It was a group message from his ex-wife: "Family meeting this Sunday? We have news to share." The ease with which they now coordinated family events still amazed him. Their daughter quickly responded with a series of excited emojis, promising to join via video call from her clinic. Sunday arrived with the warmth of early summer. Mike brought his famous potato salad, a recipe his daughter had grown up loving, to his ex-wife's house. The younger children greeted him with comfortable familiarity, already setting up the laptop for their sister's video call. The atmosphere was relaxed, worlds apart from the tension that had once filled their interactions. Once everyone was settled and their daughter's face was visible on the screen, Mike's ex-wife and her husband shared their news. They had been inspired by their experience to start a non-profit organization focused on helping divorced families navigate financial disputes constructively. They wanted everyone's input, especially Mike's, given how their own story had unfolded. "We've already had inquiries from 3 other counties," his ex-wife's husband explained, spreading out some preliminary paperwork on the coffee table. "They want to implement programs similar to the workshops we've been doing." The younger children listened intently, proud to see their parents working together to help others. Their daughter's voice came through the speakers, full of emotion. "You know what this means, right? Our story is going to help even more families." She went on to share her own news. She had recently counseled a client whose divorce was affecting their pet's custody arrangement, and she'd used the lessons from their family's experience to help them find a cooperative solution. As they discussed the nonprofit's potential, Mike revealed something he'd been considering. "I'd like to contribute the final repayment to the organization's startup costs," he said. "It feels right to use that money to help other families avoid what we went through." The suggestion brought tears to his ex-wife's eyes, happy tears this time. The younger children, inspired by the adults' discussion, began sharing their own observations. The oldest of them, now a teenager, mentioned how her friends at school wished their divorced parents could get along like their family did. Even the youngest had noticed the change, saying, "We have the biggest family at school because we have extra parents who actually like each other." Their daughter's voice came through the speakers, full of emotion. "You know what this means, right? Our story is going to help even more families." She went on to share her own news. She had recently counseled a client whose divorce was affecting their pet's custody arrangement, and she'd used the lessons from their family's experience to help them find a cooperative solution. As they discussed the nonprofit's potential, Mike revealed something he'd been considering. "I'd like to contribute the final repayment to the organization's startup costs," he said. "It feels right to use that money to help other families avoid what we went through." The suggestion brought tears to his ex-wife's eyes, happy tears this time. The younger children, inspired by the adults' discussion, began sharing their own observations. The oldest of them, now a teenager, mentioned how her friends at school wished their divorced parents could get along like their family did. Even the youngest had noticed the change, saying, "We have the biggest family at school because we have extra parents who actually like each other." Their daughter's voice cracked with emotion through the video call. "Do you remember when I was worried this whole thing would tear us apart?" she asked. "Look at us now, we're actually helping other families stay together in our own way." She held up a framed photo visible in her apartment, the one taken the day she left for her internship, with both families together. Later that evening, as they shared a meal together, something that had once seemed impossible, Mike's ex-wife pulled out an envelope. Inside was the final repayment check, but also something else, a handwritten letter addressed to both families. "I think we should read it together," she suggested. The letter, written by their daughter, expressed what the journey had meant to her. She described watching her parents transform from adversaries to allies, seeing her step-family become simply family, and learning lessons about forgiveness and growth that no amount of money could buy. "The $13,000 dispute," she wrote, "turned out to be priceless in terms of what it taught us all." As Mike drove home that night, he reflected on how their story had rippled out into their community. The family court system had reported a noticeable increase in successful mediations since implementing the programs inspired by their experience. Other families had begun sharing their own stories of healing and reconciliation, creating a network of support for those facing similar challenges. The final week of the repayment plan arrived with an unexpected invitation. The state's Family Court Administration wanted them to speak at a conference about innovative approaches to resolving family financial disputes. They would be presenting alongside legal experts and family counselors, sharing their real-world experience of turning conflict into cooperation. On the day of the final repayment, both families gathered again, this time at their daughter's clinic. She had taken a rare day off to be present in person for this milestone moment. As they stood together in her office, surrounded by medical certificates and photos of the animals she'd helped, the significance of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. Mike's ex-wife handed him the final check, but instead of simply taking it, he placed it in the center of the table. "This started as a story about money," he said, "but it became a story about family." Together, they signed the paperwork establishing the initial funding for their nonprofit organization, symbolically transforming the last remnant of their conflict into a tool for helping others. Their daughter, watching this transformation with tears in her eyes, summed it up perfectly. "Some people might see this as the end of a repayment plan, but we know it's really the beginning of something much bigger. We're not just closing a chapter, we're starting a whole new book." The younger children insisted on taking another family photo to mark the occasion. As they gathered together, Mike realized that the word "blended" no longer felt adequate to describe their family. They had become something unique, a testament to the possibility of turning financial disputes into opportunities for growth, healing, and positive change. That evening, as the families shared one last meal together before their daughter returned to her clinic, Mike looked around the table and saw not the remnants of a broken family, but the strength of one that had chosen to rebuild itself in a new way. The $13,000 dispute that had once threatened to tear them apart had instead become the foundation for something far more valuable, a legacy of healing that would continue to touch lives long after the final payment was made.